the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to read into the record. First of all, this meeting is being recorded. It is being also broadcast live on FCA TV. The chair reserves the right to call items on the agenda out of order. The times are listed for items are approximate times, and items may be reached earlier or later than the posted time. The listing of items is those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting for at least 48 hours prior to the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. If anybody had any questions, they would have had to was submitted by noontime on Friday, which I have not received any questions at this time. So, the meeting is being broadcast, as I noted earlier, on government channel 22 and 38, Verizon and Comcast respectively, and is available for live stream at fcat.org/live. All right, so I'll call the meeting to order at 8:31, and we have minutes from the December 5th, 2022 meeting and the January 11th, 23rd, and 23 meeting. To have a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make the motion, but there's 3 typos that need to be corrected.
Okay.
The word originally, approximately, and entrance.
Okay, and on which versions were those?
December 5th.
Okay, December 5th item, December 5th minutes. Okay, any other adjustments or amendments to the meeting minutes as listed?
Nope.
Okay, the motion has been made by Amy. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Chris. Okay, I'm going to have all the meeting votes are going to have to be by roll call vote. So I'll call Amy first.
Aye.
Aye. Chris Gallagher.
Yes.
Dennis Keefe.
Dennis, yes.
And John Mahoney.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes. All right, so the minutes are approved for both December 5th and for January 11th, 2023. So the first order of business is at 8:35, running a few minutes early this morning. So the first item is under finance/assessors, and it's Thom Welch. Thom, you have the floor. Go ahead.
All right. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes. Yeah, we can.
Okay. So what we're doing is we have a 5-year certification with the Department of Revenue, and that's coming in 2025. But we have to program it for 24 because of the fiscal years. We actually start in 24. So what this is a rigorous review of all our values. It requires 2 consultants generally because one doesn't do both real property and personal property. So the real property consultant is going to look at the entire database of the town. They're going to look at commercial property, industrial, residential property. They're going to look at our land values, and we have over 6,500 parcels. So it's a significant task to do that. And they're going to also do what they call a field review, a 25% field review, which is they actually drive by 1,700 parcels will stop. They don't actually get out and inspect it, but it's required to be a field review of properties, and that's 1,725 properties actually have to be looked at. And in addition to the real property, we have personal property, which is business personal property, and we have 710 accounts for those. Of those all actually have to be physically inspected. So that's the second consultant that would be involved in this. And so they actually get out and look at business. They'll visit a business. They'll go in and see what kind of business personal property. They'll classify it, whether it's taxable or not taxable. And so that's a significant effort that we don't have the capability to do in the office. In addition to that, we have that business personal property. They'll also value the wireless and cable companies and the 504 utilities, which are your Mass Electric, your New England Power, and Eversource Gas. So it's a significant effort. This isn't something we do every year. Every year we typically do what they call an interim valuation, which is we look at sales and we make adjustments based on that. And we have a consultant come in to help and look at the commercial industrial as well. But it's not as rigorous review. We still talk to DOR, we still get certified with DOR, but this review is much more intense. So that's why we need the funds that we have listed here in the capital improvement program.
So the request is for $120,000. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, great. And so I'll open it up for questions from the committee. Any questions from the committee at this time?
So Bill, this is a mandatory process?
Yes, it is. It's every 5 years, Tom.
Yeah, it used to be 3 years. They changed it to 5 years. But yeah, it's definitely mandatory. Every city and town does it. It's called a certification requirements with the Department of Revenue. They have a 100-page book of all certification that we have to meet, and it's really pretty intense. But when we do this, we know we're verifying fair market value for the community, and that's what we have to do.
And this has to be funded for the 24 year?
Yeah, because it's actually FY25, but we actually start in 24 to get ready, and we start to meet with the Department of Revenue, and because of the fiscal year, it's different than calendar. It just kind of runs over.
So you have just one contract, and so you put it out to bid, and then or is it just the state bid list? Because there aren't that many that do it, right?
There's got to be two contracts because they're two different vendors. That's what I've done in the past anyway. Because it's a business personal property, and then you have your real property, which is your regular valuation.
So following lines of John Mahoney's question, does all this have to be funded in FY24, or could because it's two contracts, could one be offset until 25?
I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend doing it all at once because we have to have them both involved right up front.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. All right. We'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your help on that.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is second. Yeah, just leave that up. Okay. So the next item is information systems, and that's Aaron Hyde. Aaron's coming on a few minutes early. Go ahead, Aaron. It's dealing with information systems.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this morning I was presenting a capital item request for $200,000. As you know, the town-wide data center, being the town of Foxboro and Foxboro Public Schools joint data center offering, was established in approximately 2014. Since we established the town-wide data center, the town's data needs, both the schools and town side, have increased significantly. When the data center was established, the primary data center site was located at the rear of the Foxboro High School, and there was a synchronously replicated failover and disaster recovery site that was located in an interior administrative office area at the Joint Public Safety Building. So since the data centers were established again, the data needs and equipment needs have increased considerably. And with that said, we're both outgrowing the space at the Foxboro Joint Public Safety Building, and then also there's a competing need for space too, because again, this is in an interior administrative area of the building. With that said, we all know that the dispatch operations and communication operations from the Foxboro Joint Public Safety Building have since moved to the SEMREC, the regional dispatch. So part of the request that we're asking for today is going to support moving and expanding the data center footprint at the Joint Public Safety Building from this interior administrative office into a former space that was providing 911 and communication, housing 911 and communications equipment related to 911 on the lower level of the Joint Public Safety Building. So that's one project that's supported by this capital. It includes also coinciding with this is a pretty significant refresh of the equipment. The majority of the equipment in this space was purchased in the time period of between 2014 and 2016. So it's quite aged at this point, and it's served its usable and supportable life cycle. So in addition to that, again, a number of the systems are aging out due to COVID. A number of hardware and software providers have actually discontinued product lines and discontinued support for some of the older equipment, focusing on new product lines and being able to support and provide hardware and parts on newer products has become their priority. As a result of that, a number of the pieces of equipment and software that we used, companies have announced end of life and end of support ahead of schedule. So this refresh will again support this. The capital item will support the refresh of this equipment and this software, network switching, and cloud software that we use both on premise and for remote access, as well as a number of new requirements that we need to meet. So those are primarily the hardware pieces to this. The other pieces are municipalities continue to be a target of cyber crime and ransomware attacks and other attacks on personal identifiable information. We've been working throughout the town to increase our cybersecurity posture. With that said, we've also been working with the town's insurance company, Maya, in terms of maintaining data privacy, data security, and cybersecurity insurance. Some of the new requirements to maintain this coverage is that we implement multi-factor authentication and next generation type ransomware protection, like early detection and response software. So in this year's budget, we've included money to move the town into the Azure cloud, so we can meet some of these requirements for multi-factor authentication. So the multi-factor authentication requirement is something so that's your username and password, and something you have. So that's typically a security token, an app on your phone that allows you to log in. So we've included money in the budget this year to pay for the subscription services and things that are needed to implement that multi-factor authentication and that early detection and response antivirus strategies. But there's ancillary equipment, software, and systems that are needed to fully realize the benefit and to implement that early detection and response and multi-factor authentication. I think Maya had shared at one point, and maybe Bill could add to this, that the data privacy and cybersecurity has become probably the number one threat in terms of liability to the town at this point, in terms of what Maya is seeing in terms of losses with municipalities. And we've all seen in the news, neighboring school districts and communities that have suffered these ransomware attacks. In 2021, the capital request for this network infrastructure refresh wasn't fully funded to the amount requested, and a number of pieces of equipment that this refresh program covers are behind in the replacement cycle. So,
Okay. Any questions from the committee of Aaron with respect to the information systems request?
Aaron, what amount of dollars were deferred to this year?
It was $50,000 at the time.
Okay.
I think the request was for 200,000 that time, and we ended up funding 150,000 of it, if I'm not mistaken. So, other questions from the committee on this one? So I will echo what Aaron did say, that this is probably one of the number one things we really have to address, that not only from a cyber perspective, but the longer we get, the further we get behind, the more expensive it gets in terms of maintaining the systems as the way they should be, addressed on a regular basis.
I'd like to also add that really, with the onset of COVID, and then the kind of the rapid mobilization, like moving from on-site work strategies to more flexible work strategies, right? That allow for potential offsite or disaster recovery scenarios where we may need to move from our traditional office spaces into a new office space, right? So this could be a pandemic, or this could be fire, flood, any number of reasons, right, where we wouldn't be able to access these spaces, has really changed the strategy, right? In terms of, at one point, planning from a brick and mortar, client hub spoke topology in terms of how we approach networking and technical services to, moving to the cloud, right? This more flexible model. So a lot of the work that we've done, and we've been able to do it within the funds provided to the capital plan and through other funding mechanisms, has really been a total shift, right? So when I talk about some of the ancillary things that are needed in terms of implementing MFA and moving to the Azure cloud or moving to a cloud topology, we're talking about backup and disaster recovery strategies, from being able to back up systems that are tethered to a desk and back up files and things that are tethered to a desk, to now being able to back up, systems that could be anywhere, connected to the internet, or systems and data that could be stored in the cloud, right? So needing to pull that data back down to back it up. So it really is, a shift in terms of the services we're offering, and we're working really hard to leverage the resources and things that we have in place, but a lot of these systems are just not able to meet that demand.
So the one question I have that we really haven't had a lot of discussion about, but we really need to keep in the back of our mind, is that during the COVID deployment of lots of new computers, either at the high school or at the school level period, and also even we provided more computers, physical computers, to a lot of employees because we tried to create a remote environment. Those are going to come up on end of life at some point too. I'm wondering, what kind of refresh are we looking at in that regard? I don't know if you've had any conversations or discussions about that.
Yeah, so we've been planning really for the refresh in terms of both on the school side and the town side of that equipment, since the pandemic, since we purchased it, and again looking at the shift in some cases from fixed computing to mobile computing. A number of computers, fixed computing has been eliminated, on the school side. And then two, as we get new employees, we start to evaluate, what their work requirements are and what their work looks like. I know, traditionally, a lot of the administrators have had desktop computers, and we've also had a laptop pool, which if administrators or employees needed to use a laptop, they could sign a laptop out from the town manager's office, and they could use that if they had a presentation to make, or they were going off site for a conference or training. They would sign out from the laptop pool. So now looking at, in terms of, specifically, at the administrative level, whether employees, will be assigned laptops with docking stations, so that they're using their laptop is also their desktop, computer. It's their computer. Now, again, with that, when an administrator has a desktop computer, it's in the office. It's tied to our wired network. We can back it up at night. We can push updates to it at night. We're in control of the power cycle, whether it's on or it's off. It requires different strategies to back up, mobile equipment that could be off, could be on, that we don't have control of the network connection necessarily. And then also it's a whole new set of security concerns and requirements. So looking at, really looking at purposefully at the use case of what we're buying and not replacing things one-to-one just because that's what we've had, in the past, but being more thoughtful about it and trying to make sure that we're being good stewards of the money we have and that we're using it in a way that's in line with our current needs.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Aaron before we move on? I will say that one thing I wanted to make mention of, and I probably should have said this from the beginning, is that the purpose of each of these hearings is to hear the different perspectives of the requester to sort of highlight the reasons for their request. We will not actually vote on them on each as they come up, but with more at the end, we'll come up with a strategy on how we deal with that. One of the things that I wanted to make mention of is that, and I didn't, and it isn't addressed here, so we may have to come back for a secondary meeting for this. And I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure we do it correctly. Is that there's been 2 articles that have been submitted for consideration for funding for sidewalk related work in the town, and sidewalks aren't specifically addressed here. Though Chris and I talked about the fact that it is it's part of the overall maintenance program that we have, but we also have requests for new sidewalks as well. But I do think it does require that we have a discussion about that because there is a potential strategy that we could use to invoke that to come up with a plan that might work through a bonding program. And so, but I don't want to talk about that too much tonight because it's not on the, I'd say it this morning because it's not on the agenda and it's not been listed as an article per se. But I do think I would like to come back and have a conversation about that with everybody. If we can even do it remotely, that's fine too. But I think, but we'll come back to that, to all of the articles at the end. We'll rank them accordingly and then come up with a financing plan. Maria and I talked about the possibility, and George talked about the possibility of doing, of either doing it today or again coming back at the second meeting with a recommendation how we fund everything, or have to maybe delay a few items because we can't fit it all in. So we'll talk about that when we get to that point later on this morning. And if it requires a secondary meeting, we'll do that as part of the meeting with the sidewalk issue. All right, so let's. With that, I'll move on to at 8:55. We're about 1 minute before that, so I'll take it over to Bill Yukna. Go ahead, Bill. For the school items.
Okay, I didn't know if you were going to go to the police next, but
yeah, you're actually you're listed as next. The police is next after that.
Okay, so our standard 4 items are on the list this year. The $200,000 for computer upgrades, again, very similar to some of the stuff that Aaron was talking about. We also would participate in the security side for the insurance issues relative to, authentication to protect us from spyware and from, hackers coming into the systems. Obviously, that's a huge concern. We also have the main hub, obviously at the high school. So we're in a continual replacement mode there relative to switchgear and backup servers and operational equipment that way and software. And our third component is much of our issues in the high school and middle school, their technology for Wi-Fi is relatively or is extremely old and past end of life. And so we're going to be into a major refresh relative to our hotspots throughout the buildings, which is going to cost us a fairly significant amount to accomplish. So I think that's, from a technology point, we're always going to be in this revolving replacement of equipment, upgrading of software, but also to the point that one was raised about the mobile equipment and other stuff that was brought in during COVID. We spent well over $1 million at that point to put everybody with a one-to-one environment. It is a long-term concern. And it literally, even if you took a very simplistic approach to it and said that we would take one grade a year, the seniors going out and take their computers offline, you can obviously keep any of the ones that are surviving in any way that could be used maybe on a lower level that doesn't need as much power. But if you did one grade a year, you're still looking at about $175,000 to $200,000 a year on that refresh, which is something we've never had before. We previously had about 900 computers in the district. We now have almost 3,000. And obviously there's a significant increase in cost. It's a very big change too, and it's a requirement when you think about the fact that most of our testing is done online for the state side. So these kids have to be well versed in this remote technology, and having the one-to-one laptops obviously has improved their ability to work that way. But we also see a constant damage, if you will, to equipment. As much as we try to hold the kids and the families responsible for real neglect, many of these systems get damaged in other ways, and so it's created another bucket of costs that we've never had before.
Just along that line, Bill, if you could just maybe address that in the sense that since we're now going to more of a digital, technologically based school environment, are there any offsets against the more traditional learning systems that would help fund that? I mean, has it changed? Is there any offsets against it?
I think what we largely see is that a number of the textbook publishers have moved to digital learning resources, which are web-based or cloud-based. Those tend to really be almost a net zero gain, right? In terms of you may not be refreshing textbooks, but then you're purchasing digital learning resources. At the same time, the licensing model, right, of learning materials or curriculum materials, much like on the technology side, has gone to that software as a service or pay as you go, subscription-based model. So in some cases, it creates more of a burden, right? Because we may be purchasing textbooks. Well, textbooks, they change, but they have a fairly long, service life, right? So there's a more expensive perpetual upfront cost for a textbook adoption where you're buying hundreds of textbooks, but those textbooks last, right? As long as they're cared for and they're covered, they last for a long time. Where with the digital learning resources and online instructional materials, it's a subscription-based service where you're paying a fee per student or a fee per teacher to access them. So it's in some cases it's not as large of a capital outlay, but the cost is still incurred, right? So it's
right.
a net zero gain. But with that said, as the reliance on the digital learning resources increases, so is our reliance on technology and our need for more robust access to the internet, content filtering, and security. As we learned when we went remote, during the pandemic and hybrid, right, that it would take a simple, cybersecurity event really to really hinder hinder learning, or if there was a network outage or an access points were not working in an area of the building, that those areas of the building would be significantly impacted in terms of curriculum delivery and their ability to access their digital learning resources. So, there are some, right? There are some offsets, but they're not necessarily significant enough, right, to meet the additional needs in some cases.
Right. So in short, it's a more
I would actually go
expensive-
the other way and say that the cost has escalated much higher. Those
Yeah.
licensing fees Aaron's talking
Right.
about are in the tunes of $100,000 a year that we are now having to incorporate in our operating budget. So,
So it is a more expensive environment in many
Yeah.
ways because of that.
absolutely.
It is, yeah, and that's what I was saying. I hope that may not have been.
No, it's helpful because
but yeah. The offsets that are created are minimal compared to some of the increased costs.
Because you hear that there's sometimes that knee-jerk reaction. Say, well, not buying as many books, so how come, how? So it's going to be cheaper to run the system. The answer is no, because of the fact you have to license that software every year now, compared to buying a textbook like once every 5 to 10 years.
Right.
That type of thing. So
I think the other cost is you have to support all of these users now.
Right.
As
Right.
well, and the equipment itself, the breakage, that's an increased cost that you didn't have with books for sure.
Now, obviously,
question.
with mobile computing, there's opportunity costs, right? We're not fixed to time and place, right? So there's both on the town side, there's more flexible work opportunities if in case of a natural disaster or weather or pandemic. But then for students too, in terms of time and learning, the flexible school day, learning beyond the school day and the school walls. But with that said, mobile equipment isn't as durable as the fixed equipment. When we buy a desktop computer, we're realizing upwards of 7 years. In some cases, that this equipment would last, right, and it would be serviceable. With mobile equipment, it's a smaller form factor, so you have electronics exposed to heat. You have batteries, right? So people know that batteries have charge cycles, and they don't last. They don't perform as well over time. But then you just have accidental damage, which was Bill's talking about. So we weren't really able to anticipate the level of accidental damage that we would see. This is related to often to devices being dropped. So that's been difficult for us to keep up with. Two, with the pandemic, the cost of parts and supply chain issues have been difficult. So in some cases, with laptops where we had anticipated paying, maybe $150 to $200 for a replacement part, that some of those parts that were in that $200 range soared over $300 or $350, making it much more expensive to maintain them.
Right. Okay.
Hey, Aaron and Bill, with students, can they use their own home computers, or do they have to use school equipment provided to them to access?
So every student's provided with a device, and then students also have opportunities to use their own devices as well, whether that's at home. Some students use their school devices in school and then choose to use a different device at home. And some students do bring devices into the school building. With that said, those devices have access to guest networks, which are available in more specific areas of the building. For instance, cafeteria, the media center, the art labs, areas, the auditorium, areas of the building where, we've identified needs for students that are bringing in their own device that are beyond what we can sometimes provide with the devices that we provide. With that said, we prioritize access to the school issued devices and in instructional spaces and, primarily in classrooms, right? So that we can make sure we can meet the demands of the instructional program. with the equipment that we provide students for learning.
So there's
Other
no
questions? Okay. Go ahead,
there's
Joe.
no you know, if a family has their own equipment, they get a stipend at the end of the year for not using a school laptop, anything like.
No, John, the issue you have to think about, John, is the fact that we can secure our networks and our equipment much better than we can secure something you might buy for your house. So when you look at all these cyber issues that we're facing, quite honestly, we're probably moving towards a direction where someone using their own device in the future is going to be very, very hard for us to be able to say that we can stop someone from hacking in the system by coming through a third party's piece of equipment. So it's probably going to be a less and less of an option as we move forward, but it's not something we can control by having outside of us.
It would also be very difficult too. So when we provide equipment, we make sure that equipment's capable of accessing and compatible with the instructional content and materials and tools that we're providing for teachers and students. So the cost to support non-district owned devices would likely be very, very high, right? Because we're not in control of the devices. We don't have parts on hand. And then two, it's really become, as we shift to mobile learning, as we shift to digital learning content, right? It really has become the curriculum, right? And we talk about, providing students with instruction as part of providing them their free, appropriate education, right? It's very difficult. It's near impossible, let's say, to do that at this point without them having technology, because a lot of the curriculum is so technology infused and integrated, with technology that it's important that they have their devices. So we've tried in terms of helping students, supporting their own devices, especially through the pandemic. It's very difficult, and there's quite a disparity between the equipment that families are able to provide.
All right. So in talking about, let's move on to say that you had some school bus replacements too,
Yeah.
Bill. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So the school bus replacement, as you all know, we actually lost a year because of COVID. So our equipment kind of aged, and then orders that we placed in FY22, FY21 didn't actually show up until the fall of this year. So things got really pushed out of whack, which put a lot more mileage on the vehicles that were in the front line and running. So even though technically right now, I know the mechanics would like to see us replace 4, I requested 2 from the CIP and 1 if I'm capable of doing it through end of year savings within the school district, which obviously we're looking at every dollar we can to try to make that happen. So while 2 would be coming from CIP, the third only if funds are available would come from the operating budget. And that would still leave us 1 behind what would be typically have been our normal schedule. But I think obviously trying to be reasonable here, I know I'm not going to come up with money for 2 buses. So again, it gets us in, and what we're seeing is obviously the long lead times on these buses. The buses I ordered last June, aren't going to show up until about the end of March or beginning of April of this year. Typically, we would have had them in end of August, beginning of September. And as I said, the year before, it took almost a year and a half to get. So we have converted to gas-powered engines, which makes it, I think, a little bit easier for the mechanics to be able to work on. It also makes them more dependable. And for the 100,000 miles we put on vehicles, we end up having body problems before we have engine problems for the most part. So due to rust and exposure to ice, to assault and stuff like that. So typically we go for a 10-year cycle, but we're replacing 2 2012s, and we have a 2011 out there and 2 2014s out there. So as I said, we'll be 1 behind, even if we get the approval for the 2 from the CIP and the 1 from the budget. Our next item is the copiers, which is a normal rotation, which we run through the buildings. Obviously, we sit with nearly 26 copiers, and we try to replace 4 a year, and we usually end up going about $1.2 million to 1,000,004 copies per machine before we cycle them out. We put them on 3-year service warranties as part of our purchase price, and then we put them on a service contract after that. And the final item, and I'll let you come back to all three of these, the final item is the last year of the music program at the high school, replacement of equipment. As you know, we've been doing about 50,000 a year. This is equipment that was quite aging, well over 20 years. Most of it had gotten to its end of its even serviceable life as far as just trying to have things maintained. In this case, the bigger items would be a couple tubas that need to be replaced, a bass clarinet, and a bassoon are the biggest items on it. The rest of it is some of the smaller strings and violin, and alto saxophone equipment, but total comes out to $49,981. So just almost at the 50,000.
Great. So what's the cycle for that, Bill, in that respect? How many more do you need after this?
This is it. This was the last one of the 3-year process. And this, again, most of this equipment is 20 to 30 years old. So it's not something that we typically would be coming back for. When we originally looked at it, we just thought it was too big a chunk to hit the town with it, in 1 year, and felt that if we took the highest priorities each year, that we could get back to a really good inventory of equipment. And I think the music department is very happy with what we've been able to do for them.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. Any questions of Bill before we move on to police?
I'd just like to talk quick about the school buses, having kind of the insight on that. Bill and I have talked quite a bit about, that replacement schedule, and, there's kind of a caveat not this upcoming year, because the bus company has actually ordered 5 buses with our spec, not knowing how many we're going to be able to get from them. They're actually redesigning those buses, those gasoline engine buses. And the following year, there are going to be no orders for those buses. So we're going to fall behind again if we only do 2 or even 3. We're going to be behind the 8 ball on those buses, come a year from now. So, this kind of goes into a bigger conversation we've been having over the last few years that, we know that we need, 3 school buses every year because we're replacing them on a 10-year cycle. We've got 30 of them. That's 3 a year, get through 10 years. The fact that we come back year after year, and we're, fighting for 2 or 3, is kind of a tough thing, where the capital plan in the last few years has just been what's left over. And we're kind of picking up the scraps of the budget for that. So I think, part of our bigger conversation needs to be, some of these items we know need to come back every single year. We've got to find a way to dedicate funding to that, at least on the short term, until some of these other things come off the list, bond items, some of the other payments that we're making. But, the buses, again, 2, if Bill has enough to get 3, that's great for this year. But next year, we're not going to be able to order any gasoline engine buses because they're redesigning that entire thing and they're not selling any next year. So just something to consider on the school bus front.
Are they going to make them all electric? Is that the
No. The issue is the engine itself, that was the PSI engine that we used to, or that we currently are buying, is no longer going to be manufactured, and so it's a brand new gas engine that they're working on. And as I said, we've moved previously, probably 5 years ago, Chris, we started going to the gas engine units. Again, a diesel engine is a great engine for 250, 300,000 miles. If you're, in a vehicle that you really push that way, we push these to about 100,000 miles. So buying the extra cost on a diesel and then the maintenance on being able to work on them is a little bit harder. There is a whole push towards electric buses, which I think you probably saw that Boston made a move on. But to be honest with you, and Chris and I have talked about this, we are not in any type of a position to be able to go that route. The requirements for the mechanics is phenomenal. You're looking at master electricians because of the voltage that you're dealing with, number one. And number two, the cost of actually keeping them, as far as charge and stuff like that, the charging stations. But third, you don't get the distance out of them. So doing field trips to, for schools, for whether it's athletics or anything else, you can't be sure that you're going to be able to get the bus there and back on a single charge. So for a lot of reasons, we just don't think those are the right moves to make at this point. And we feel that the gas engine is the most efficient and the best item for us to maintain.
Yeah, we actually had a conversation about this, that it sounded like a good soundbite for the environmental considerations, but the practical considerations of running those buses just does not even come close to what we should be doing. And so I think that we're still a long ways away from actually looking at that as a real alternative. Right now, it's got a long ways to go, in my opinion. But
yep.
Okay, other questions, comments, considerations for the
just a quick yes or no to Bill on the copiers. Do people using the copiers have individual codes?
Yes, they actually, it comes from teachers. I mean, all the copiers are actually in administrative areas. They're not out in hallways or stuff where kids could use them and stuff. And kids have to, I mean, teachers actually can send them right from their systems and have a code in which they can go and print out at the time they need to get them. So.
Great, good, thank you.
Great. All right, thank you very much, Bill and Aaron, and about for that information. I'm going to go now to at the time being 9:16. We're just 1 minute behind with Chief Grace and the police department. Go ahead, Chief. Your mic's not on, Chief. Hey, look, no, one more time.
Someone shut it off on me.
Yeah, here you go. No, I think for some reason it kept going off. Go ahead.
I have 2 items for CIP this morning. One of them is the second year of the TASER funding, which was approved last year for $49,000. That we have purchased all of those items, and we are in the process of cross-training all 70 offices. We are actually running a training today, getting all the reserve officers training. So we shall have that fully operational within the next 6 weeks, department-wide. And the other item is a prisoner transport van. This was part of the 5-year CIP projected item that was going to come into its rotation. Our current van is exceeding 10 years. It's on its second engine. We've already replaced it once. And like the school buses, these vehicles, they just sit out in the elements, and rust is also a factor. But more importantly is when we talk about technology, the recording system for the prisoner transport in the van is not where it needs to be. And we have, we are well overdue for a new van. Ultimately, do I really want to be having a transport van for the police department? The answer is no. But on all of the non-major events, like the soccer games, we don't utilize the sheriffs for that option. And so it's kind of a must. The restraint system within the van also is, I'm going to say, below the liability level that I'm comfortable with, and what we've seen in some of the lawsuits and some of the other police departments in transporting. So they have redesigned the vans themselves and the transport cages. So this request comes off the state bid list, and it comes in around $91,702. We have it all built out, spec'd, including the cameras. So that's the complete cost. And again, like everybody said, we're not going to get this in the next month. This will probably be 8-10 months, a year away before we can actually purchase.
That was my question, Chief. How long? What's the time lead on getting this vehicle? You say about 9-10 months.
Yeah, everything's that slow. It's really built to order at this point. No one's sitting with them in their lots anymore, calling you, asking you to buy them. So we, I have an excellent relationship with the Norfolk County Sheriff. So he has some pretty big buying power. So he's already reached out to me and said, if you're looking at what vendor we're using, you may be able to jump on with us. All these are purchased again under the state bid list or the Plymouth County purchasing group. So we get the best price. And that's
Chief,
it.
So is that
Quick,
getting any better at all in terms of lead times on any of these vehicles? Is anybody, any thoughts, Chris? I mean, I know you've been dealing with us a lot on
Now,
every vehicle.
unless you find something used on a lot, it's at least 6 months, if not a year, for most of the stuff. We have stuff that we placed some of our larger trucks after the CIP meeting last year, and it's been 12 months and we still haven't seen them yet. We've heard they're built, they just haven't made it up to Massachusetts yet.
I know we're seeing that same issue with ambulances and fire trucks, et cetera. So, police cruisers, Chief, is that the same thing with them, or what's the story on that?
I haven't bought a 2022 or a 2023 Cruiser because they don't exist. All of ours were leftovers. So ours from last year, as Chris said, we find out that they're built and you run the VIN number and you find out they're sitting somewhere in a lot in New Jersey because they don't have all of the parts yet to, some of them were the chip delays and stuff like that. So we're still missing, 2 from last year.
Chief Grace, John Mahoney here. Anything special you need to get for the video storage upload? And if you get video in the vehicle, how does it, not get re-erased or, get from the van?
Yeah,
to...
so just that system is about $4,000. We're mirroring what the sheriffs use for retention. This will have at least 30-day retention on any of the transports. We not going to be able to retain every transport video, but what we do is if there's ever an injury or if there's any kind of altercation or any arrest that involves a use of force, we extract it and then we save it internally and we put it aside, number one, for court prosecution and also for any civil ramifications, which are becoming more and more prevalent right now on almost every arrest. So that's the goal, and that's what we're doing now. But the system is what we have in there is, I think it's over 7 years old. So you can imagine what a 7-year-old system looks like technology-wise, and it does lack one of the cameras. We want to move to a 3-camera because the transport vans have 2 separate transport compartments where you can separate male and female. And then there's an exterior camera when your prisoners are going in and outside the vans, especially when you're searching, doing their property inventory, capturing all that. That's where a lot of struggles occur. And then there's allegations of missed property or cash stolen. So capturing that as well is important.
So I'll open up any further questions of the chief. I didn't want to mention that we talked about possibly paying for the tasers within the budget, and I did look at that seriously, and we thought at the time that we would actually do that. But as we're finding with some of these items that it's not as easy to fit these things in financially, even though it's a relatively small number. It takes away from our ability to actually fund the budget. We're trying to fund the budget with less free cash to make the budget more stable. And as a result, if we were to fund some of this would probably more likely be a free cash type of item. But I'll just Maria, if you have any further comments on that, I would appreciate it. But if not, we can just move on. But Maria, if you're on, can you just talk to that issue a little bit?
Yep. So essentially, with the operating budget is you should limit the use of one-time revenues towards your operating budget, aka your free cash. And by having this, like as Bill mentioned, by having this item in the operating budget, it takes away from some of the other needs. So really, your CIP budget is funded through one-time revenue. So that's why we switched it back over to the CIP budget, and we plan to keep it this way, just so that we're able to fund other items in the operating budget with not one-time revenue sources.
Okay. So thank you, Marie, for that.
Chief,
So
Chief, just
any
on
question for the chief?
Yeah, just on the tasers quick, Mike. That's a 5-year payment plan, correct?
That is, and at the end of the 5 years,
We're back at it. Looking
we're
for-
back at it. It's not like I get to keep them
because they're not certified anymore after 5 years, right?
no, it's end of life. What the company says.
Right.
And
Just wanted
Chris,
to make sure I
hopefully someday your garage is bigger when they what you have now. Maybe you can store my van there so it doesn't sit out in the elements and just rust out. It pains
One of these
me,
days.
but, yeah.
Chief, how many vans do you have?
One.
One. So what's your backup if that goes down?
Well, you have the sheriff, right? If the sheriff can help you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be the sheriff's. That's our only backup. We do try to our custodies have been down at Gillette, but but our concern is some of the soccer crowds where we end up with like disturbances in the parking lot where we kind of need that, 3 or 4 custodies that have to be arrested. It's very helpful in situations like that. And on the soccer games, we don't utilize the Norfolk County Sheriffs just because the scope of the detail isn't as large. But if the van becomes too much of a liability, then we may just have to not use ours and use them. That's assuming they're available.
If this, as you're talking about this, the question comes up: are there any uses beyond the stadium for the van?
No.
Which begs the question:
The days of going to a house party.
If that's the case, right?
Yeah, I mean, the days of going to a house party and putting 17 high school kids in to bring it down to the PD, that's over. None of that. I can't even put a juvenile in a transport van. We've had some disturbances up at Patriot Place in the parking lot, but I'm not going to be able to get the van up there. I'm just going to call mutual aid, and the other surrounding towns will help us do the transports. So it's absolutely primarily stadium related.
So that's the point is that we're providing this service primarily for the events that occur there, and so it begs the question, why are we funding it under those conditions? So just something to think about. It's something that obviously I won't be able to deal with going forward, but something to think about as a committee that these are, if you can see things that are specifically related to just stadium events and things that are exclusive almost to that, you really have to question whether or not those are items that we should be asking for funding from Gillette, et cetera. So, all right, let's go. Moving on to we'll go on to anything else, Chief. You're all set there. Is that as far as that goes?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, very good. I'll move on to Chief Kelleher. Go ahead. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me all right? I got a little
well, you're losing your voice there. It looks like you're losing it.
There's a lot of happy people about that.
Yeah, there you go.
But real quick, just pretty hopefully straightforward, a little bit convoluted, but the first item is our lease payment for 2 ambulances and a fire truck. I think this is year 3 of the lease payments. The second item, this is where the convoluted piece comes in. We're suffering issues like everybody else. Supply chains killing us. Trying to get vehicles and equipment and stay on track for our capital plan is real challenging. So what we're trying to do is stay ahead of it. We've been really, really agile and kind of creative in our approach. We have really good relationships with our vendors. And one of the things that popped up right around Christmas was we were able to grab an ambulance that came off the assembly line that was supposed to go to a hospital somewhere in like the Midwest. And our salesman up at Allegiance Fire Apparatus on Route 1 grabbed it. And we were able to use the money that was approved through the lease to buy that ambulance, just to get an ambulance in the door, because as with Norwood Hospital gone, we're running all over the place. The ambulances are high mileage, so that was one of the things we were able to do. With Bill's help and Marie's help, we were able to kind of navigate that. So that ambulance was $355,000. I'm asking today for $395,000. What I'd like to do is replace the $355,000. So we can keep the 2 ambulances we have on order. And I was notified that we're going to have about a $18,000 increase in chassis because our original order, I believe, was for 2021 chassis. Now we're looking for 2023. So there was a price increase. But the good news and the silver lining in all this is I have the price locked in at about $225, $230 an ambulance. So the bad news is I don't know when they're going to be delivered. It could be another couple of years before we actually get our hands on them. But the price is locked into that early 2020, 2021 pricing. So now, I mean, I know I've been talking to chiefs. We just had a chiefs conference. They're getting quotes of over $500,000 for just one single ambulance. So I think, from a financial aspect, we're in really good shape as far as what we're paying for these trucks. It's almost a steal. I just hate to cancel I think the manufacturer would like nothing more than for me to cancel this order because, they can sell the trucks for double what we're paying for them. So that's kind of the silver lining in the whole thing. The bad news is I still don't have a delivery date. We're still waiting on chassis. So I'll entertain any questions. And I apologize if that's kind of a convoluted story, but we're just trying to do our best through this supply chain issue. It's been very challenging. The good news is on the fire apparatus side, we're in pretty good shape. We did take delivery of the fire truck that was approved. That was only probably 8 months or 6 months overdue, which isn't a bad. Stupid things like switches. We were waiting for rocker switches to turn the lights on and stuff, like very small, detailed items. But the circuit boards, I guess, in the switches they couldn't get. So it's kind of, I think on the fire apparatus side, we're in very good shape. I think, and I'm just hoping that they catch up and this issue is over soon.
Well, there are new plants being built for chips, so that's a good thing. I don't know if that's going to help the situation with you, particularly on ambulances, but it is going to help in other vehicles because that's what, particularly Ford is notorious for having all kinds of chip issues. So
that's the trucks we're buying is Ford. We're waiting for the F-550 chassis.
Right. That's the problem. Other questions, comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, the only question I had, Chief, is this comes from the ambulance fund, doesn't hit free cash. Do you have adequate reserves in the ambulance fund if some kind of emergency comes up or some other big purchase comes up?
Yeah, we have a pretty good reserve. We were very, very fortunate. We took probably the largest capital purchase that we were looking to buy out of that fund was a ladder truck. We got a federal grant for that, so that freed up some cash. So we're in really good shape.
Great.
I will say that the chief and his team have been very resourceful when it comes to grants. So they have the right connections and the right relationships with folks that really allow them to really pursue those on a pretty vigorous level. So that really has helped us a lot in those areas. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Other questions, comments, and issues for the chief? Relatively small request this year, which is good. So the other things that you had that you have been working on, the doors and the floor got done, and the doors finally got figured out. That was not an easy figure.
No.
That was a challenging issue. To believe it or not, you would think something like that would be relatively simple, but it just wasn't that easy to navigate because there aren't that many people that provide the service. That's the problem.
No, that's. I mean, you talk about supply chain. The other issue is finding labor. So we get approved for those to do to epoxy the floor. We had to put it out to bid twice to get people to come and do the job. And the same thing with the garage doors. We put it out to bid. We couldn't keep breaking. So we had to petition DCAM to give us a waiver. So we didn't have to go out to bid. We were able just to award it to a company as an emergency purchase. So it's just crazy. The whole world is upside down. I can't figure it out. But
well, everybody here is trying to do the best they can to navigate it. So I appreciate all those efforts. So, all right. Anybody else? Comments, questions? All right. Very well. Let's move on now to Public Works. So who's going to do that presentation, Chris? Is that going to be you or is it going to be Lance? Okay, Lance. I see Lance. Thanks for jumping on, Lance. All of a sudden you were there. So okay.
Yeah, I got Lance and Bob queued up, and I'll chime in as things pop into my head and need to come out of my mouth.
Okay, great. All right, yeah. Lance, you're on.
All right, I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. So starting off with the street sweeper, this is our last payment on a 5-year lease. It's an essential piece of equipment. We use it for stormwater compliance as part of our permit with the EPA and Mass DEP. We need to sweep the roads at least twice a year to keep contaminants down and to just maintain the roads themselves. So that's pretty straightforward. This will be like, again, the last payment in a 5-year series. Do we have any questions? I guess I'll just ask individually before we move forward. No
I
questions.
think that's
All
pretty
right.
straightforward. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. The next item is the replacement of a 1-ton dump truck. This is replacing a 2012 Chevy 3500 on 1 ton. This is part of our normal schedule, which is, actually, kind of behind schedule in a way, but it's 2012. It's due for service. It's due to be replaced. Part of our routine fleet replacement schedule. And then, yep.
These
ahead.
trucks, as we've seen across the board with everything, are just more expensive. We used to be able to pick up 2 or 3 years ago a 1-ton dump truck for $70,000, kind of all in with the plow and everything, and now it's almost doubled. We're at $125,000 for this piece of equipment for this truck now. It's a daily use vehicle. It's used for plows. The highway crew uses it on a daily basis for potholes and for repairing catch basins and everything else that they do. And the one we have right now is just the body's just starting to rust through. They've patched it a few times, welded some plates onto it to try to keep it going, and it's still out there. It's running and it's actually probably scraping snow and slush right now, but it's due. Like I said, the smaller trucks, those 1 tons, we're looking at like every 8 to 10 years. It's kind of life expectancy on these things. About 100,000 miles on the truck. And same thing with the school buses. We've started replacing these with gasoline engines versus the diesel engines, which helps as well in the expenses for the life of the truck.
What's the lead time on these vehicles? I know you bought some vehicles last year. Have received any of them?
The only thing we've received is the Chevy Tahoe. The pickup trucks, the 3500s are still on order. We're going on 12 months. We haven't seen them yet.
Wow. Amazing.
Part of the issue is that Chevy and the Chevy, Dodge, Ford, they only open their order window for a very small time in late summer. So as much as we told the vendors that we wanted these trucks a year ago, they actually don't open up the ordering system until August. And this year it was actually, I think, a little bit later. And I believe they had a 72-hour window to get your orders in, and then they closed it because the plants just aren't producing as many trucks as they used to. So
the question I have is, one of the things that I don't know if we're going to be able to fit everything into this plan financially right now, but we could possibly pick this up. I think more likely we could finish it up in the fall with some additional funding, because we'll get a recertification of free cash, which we think will be pretty significant this year, given the fact that we've got a lot of stuff going on event-wise this year that should help our free cash position. But I think the question I have, Chris, is do these companies require like a down payment, or can we just go ahead and order them and then cancel it if the money doesn't come through?
Yeah, they don't look for anything from us. There's no deposit or anything for these vehicles. The way we've been running, or we're trying to get to, is that when we order these trucks, we actually have a signed PO from the town to the vendor, securing that, and that would, in essence, lock us in place. I don't think any vendor is going to turn around and say, hold us to it if we say there's no funding available. But usually when we create the PO, and Marie and George might be able to speak on that, is we're looking to make sure that funding's been allocated or at least approved at some point prior to making that PO.
Right. Well, certainly before taking delivery, I think that would be the key thing. But I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that, if we didn't commit to, say, funding these vehicles, some of these vehicles right now, but we still agreed that the purchase was necessary. We just have to, basically come back with a financing plan that reflects a later commitment as opposed to one that's like, say, today or a town meeting of sort of, we could do it maybe in the fall. But I think I think at least the committee could actually know that this is a priority purchase, but with a different funding schedule, so to speak. And I think that's something that Maria and I want to talk about with George. So that way we're not pushing the issue off. We're just keeping you in the slot for ordering these things, but not putting you, but not necessarily committing the dollars until later on. That's all.
That makes sense.
Okay. So, all right, go ahead, Lance. You want to go ahead and for the next few items?
Yeah. So maybe we have, a few more vehicles here. It's part of that, which you're just talking about. So we have the replacement of a 1995 backhoe, which it's no longer in service. We already auctioned that off. It was, no longer serviceable. So we're behind schedule in replacing that. We also have, a 3500, two 3500s we're trying to add. One for the tree and park service, which, we have increased demands on them from the stormwater requirements. And also, we've, in terms of disposing grass clippings from fields and, we're not supposed to let those sort of, we used to just leave them on site to decompose. We're now hauling them away. I think that's to the residents' benefits as well. I think there's complaints regarding, odors and stuff from some of those fields and the decomposition there. So, it certainly makes life a little easier in that regard. The other utility truck is for the equipment maintenance. We now have 4 mechanics. We have 2 trucks for them, looking to get a third, and that would also help us with our snow removal. It's what that truck would additionally be used for. So, any discussion on those additional vehicles?
Any questions for the committee on that? Well, but what we'll do is we'll go back at the end of your presentation, Lance, and I'll ask the committee for any further questions.
Sure. Okay. All right. I'll just keep going. So we have a lawnmower. This is again to replace an existing 12-foot winged lawnmower to help mow the fields. That's another equipment, just normal schedule replacement. We have the Payson. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to jump over to the DPW facility renovation thing, or hold that for the end?
And why don't you hold that to the end?
Yeah. So we have the Payson Road irrigation system. No, that's where the lacrosse team plays. That is, we're looking to upgrade that field. It's, the system there is 30 plus years old. It's, as part of the demolition of that building that we're trying to accomplish, we're looking to upgrade the irrigation field as well, make it something more easily serviced for, long-term use. Potentially there, I think we're trying to just talk with the lacrosse to see if maybe they can pitch in some additional funding, so it wouldn't be entirely in the town, but we estimate the cost to be somewhere around $75,000 from the quotes we've received thus far. The stump grinder, so we looking to replace or buy a stump grinder. We used to have access to one through a 10-town collaborative about 30 years ago. That wasn't something that really worked out well for all the communities. Most communities seem to have now just purchased their own. And sort of coordinating access to that stump grinder was always a bit of an issue, hassle. So at this point, I think, we're trying to follow what most communities done and just really have our own on hand so we can address those needs for the community without having to, wait months out to have access to that.
Okay, great. You want to talk about the renovation?
Sure. So the DPW renovation, I'm sure some of you are, familiar with some of this. We requested, is it $750,000 to sort of get rolling on some of the more immediate needs of the existing facility. The roof, for instance, is leaking. And, we have the old sort of solar panels that need to be removed up there, which, previously had caught fire and needed to be disconnected. So those are no longer in service. And also the building exterior itself needs to be repainted. I think we have a coat of primer on there that never really got its, final coating. So there's, significant work that just needs to be done to the existing facility in the meantime while we look to expand the facility potentially. But this is sort of, it helps us to get to that point while taking care of our existing facility in the meantime, and would help us move forward. And, we just wanted to see the board's opinion on it this time. I think it's a reasonable sort of, estimation. We need to work with the town's facility maintenance crew to kind of finalize some of those, some of the costs in there, but we think it's probably, hopefully a conservative number we put forward on some of those needs.
If I could add to that one, exactly what he said as far as redoing the roof, which means you have to bring it up to the right insulation codes, repointing the exterior block work. So before you repaint it, there's areas where we had some damage because of roof issues relative to that. But the reality here is, even with the move forward on the addition, you're not looking at having that addition, as we saw with the borough, taking almost 5 years. Even if we're able to hit the ground shovel ready in the late fall or early next year, you're probably another 2 years out. So it's critical that we maintain the main building for that, that timeline, number one. But number two, the main building is going to stay in play. It's not going anywhere. And so we felt that it was a much better process to chunk out the things that we could do on a facility ourselves versus having to put that into a contract, which would just cost the town more money. We've done this on other buildings. Replacing a roof on our own is something we can easily contract out. Redoing the block work and painting, that's something we can contract out ourselves. We don't need a GC and a project manager and everything else to go along with that. And we can advance the timeline so we can get that stuff done now, hopefully this summer, make a big dent on it while preserving the building and being prepared for the next stage. So from the building committee's point of view, that's where we were with it.
Okay. Great. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns on public works from the committee?
175 is the right number for a backhoe right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we have an estimate. We were looking at options of doing like a rubber tired excavator, which would give us a little more flexibility on some of the projects. It's a smaller setup, work zone area wise, but the rubber tired excavator was almost 300,000. Actually, I think it was more than 300,000. So the backhoe is a piece of equipment we've had. It's kind of tried and true. You have your excavation options on one end, and you've got your kind of front end loader options on the other side. So like Lance said, that piece was in 1995. It has since been sold through an auction. We actually somebody actually paid $18,000 for that machine that left our services. It had over 7,000 hours on it. It's something that's used by both highway and tree and park, and sometimes water if their machine goes down or if they need it. But it's primarily for highway, tree and park, and that 175 is the right number for a backhoe right now.
What's the lead time in getting one of those, Chris?
I think those are more readily available than the trucks. There's hope that, I think we had Cat spec that out for us. They tend to turn the heavy equipment around a little bit faster. That stuff's more readily available. People aren't buying that stuff off the lot as much. So I think probably, from when we have an order in place, 3 to 4 months probably.
Okay. All right. Other questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, Lance, I appreciate 10 towns sharing a stump grinder isn't ideal. But if we get to a funding issue here, is it possible that you could approach one other town, to share the cost of a stump grinder?
Chris knows more about sort of the conversations that have been had there, Chris.
Yeah, so right now there's only 3 towns left on this collaborative purchase. It started, I think it was close to 30 years ago. I was actually in Westwood 10 years ago, and it needed repairs. And I actually remember making phone calls to all 10 towns. And at that point, I think 6 of the 10 all said, nope, we're not interested in it. So we're down to 3. I think, it can be the conversation. I think it's operationally, what the town wants to have. Like Lance said, when we go looking for it, it's trying to find out who has it, where it is, what it needs for repairs when we're getting it back. It's kind of each town's kind of dealing with it on their own. Every time we get it, we're doing work on it. And then it's, delayed going out versus having it in our possession and be able to do the work when we know it needs to be done. It's an option. It's definitely something to have that conversation with. It's, the stump grinder itself, it's still functioning. So this may be, in my ranking, to be honest, it may be something we can push off a year. But it is coming due, and part of it too is we wanted to make it known that we actually have one. We do have part ownership in this machine, and the people that have trees cut down in front of their house, they know it's there, and they enjoy having that when it's needed.
At the risk of sounding almost mercenary in this process, but is it possible, along what Dennis was asking, is that we can maybe let folks use it, but with a fee, because only because it will help offset if we're going to buy it and we're going to own it, we're going to maintain it. Is it possible for us to get a fee for use of it?
But I think we'd have to look at that liability wise.
Yeah,
what that would be to rent that to almost rent it out for that purpose. But in that we've got those intermunicipal agreements where we can pull something like that off.
It's really no different as I see that, Chris, with us maintaining other fire trucks and things of that nature. So the coverage is there for that. That's not an issue. But I think if we're gonna, front load the cost of paying for it and owning it and maintaining it, if they want to use it, yeah, you can use it. But here's what it costs to run it to use it for some extended period of time, etc.
Yeah, and like I said, this is something that is kind of at the bottom of the list. Came in when we actually got it into our possession this fall. It kind of jumped out at us that this is a piece of machine that's 30 years old and is tending to be on its last legs, but it's still functional right now. We can push it off for at least a year and have some of those other conversations about, is another town willing to co-own it, or is there possibility, potential for renting it out?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So we'll go to Bob. Bob is going to take on I assume going to do the water and sewer.
Yes. Following along, first item is we're our water commissioners, and we've been looking at adding $1 million worth of water main replacement per year, which sounds like a lot, but in pre-COVID time, that would be about 1 mile. And right now we're looking at a combined probably 70 miles of asbestos cement pipe and old cast iron. We know these are weak points in the system and we need to start attacking them. And, as a town, yes, it's a lot of work to do, but we're not alone. This is universal across America there's just this much work to do. In the beginning,
Can I just a question on that, Bob? So, what's the technology these days for relining those pipes?
we've used a product. It's a cured in place structural liner. It's good for certain situations. If a particular neighborhood is already built out and the water main is the proper size, and those can be lined, which does save some, but it just doesn't save as much as you really wish, because to put it in, you need to run temporary water mains. Every single gate has to be cut out. There are access pits, so you don't destroy the road as bad, but it does add up quite a bit. So when all's said and done, a lot of times you might as well just use a brand new ductile iron water main.
So we have done that, like Bob said, we've done at least 4 miles, probably closer to 5 miles of that liner. When we were doing it, it was saving probably a third of the cost of actually putting new pipe in the ground. That price difference has dropped and they're more equal. The the last project we did, where we lined Beach Street, the contractor actually came to us, the general contractor came to us and said, any chance I can just put a brand new pipe in for you for the same price? But we had already bid it out. He had his sub lined up to do the lining piece of it. That was just not ethically not going to be something that we would do. But they're getting to the point where putting pipe in the ground is pretty much the same cost as that liner is. And like Bob said, part of our problem is that a lot of the asbestos cement and cast iron pipe is a 6-inch diameter, and that does not meet current standards for fire hydrants. So any new fire hydrants that go on the ground need to be connected to at least an 8-inch diameter pipe. So, we've kind of taken the stance, and the commission has taken the stance that to line a 6-inch pipe through a neighborhood just does not make sense. One, for public safety reasons for that fire hydrant standard, and again, for the cost difference, we will upgrade that pipe and work on repaving the road on top of that at that time.
Okay. All right, very good. Go ahead, Bob. Moving on.
Okay, moving on from water mains. The next thing we've got is for our brand new Chestnut Street water plant. We've received a SRF loan of $14 million to put in a PFAS removal plant. Something we definitely don't want to do, but we're getting to the point where there's no choice. The current Massachusetts standard is 20 parts per trillion. Chestnut Street has been ranging from 14 to 18. And EPA is talking about lowering the limit down to 10. So we really need to get ahead of this there's a long lead time just for doing water quality testing to select the proper media before you can do the design, before you can do the construction, building, and all that. So we have been awarded this. We're hoping not to have to repay it next year, but starting the year after, because we're looking at about $860,000 a year just for repayments.
So this is something I talked to Thom, who's the engineer from Ty and Bond, who's doing this work for us. SRF funding, the repayment of that does not start until the construction is complete. So currently we're looking at doing the design work this upcoming, we have a contract in hand, just not signatures on it yet. So we're looking at doing design work this upcoming fiscal year, hopefully going out to bid spring of 24. And then there's an 18 to 24 month construction period beyond that. So this is something, we put in the request before we had all the details. We were told we were going to be awarded the funding, but we didn't know all those specifications as far as repayment schedule and that type of stuff. So this SRF funding will not need to be repaid probably until 2025, FY26. However, what has come up is that the design funding is not included in the SRF funding. So the $14 million that we're going to get for the construction does not actually cover the design. So kind of an interesting situation where we've asked for the $860,000 for the repayment. The design contract is $785,000. That's what we have in hand as a proposal from Ty and Bond. So it's almost an even swap. It's going towards that same PFAS treatment plant. It's just not for the SRF repayment. So just a conversation late yesterday was having that conversation with Ty and Bond, and wanted to bring that forward this morning and see what we can do as far as retitling this request from SRF repayment to PFAS treatment plant design. So something to talk about as we move through.
Okay. All right. The water and sewer vehicles.
Okay, the first is a Chevy 3500 one-ton dump truck, which is replacing a 2014 Ford F-150. This is a program scheduled change. And the other 2 Chevy 3500s, these are actually utility bodies, so we're not looking for 3 dump trucks. And that's replacing a 2005 Ford F-350 and a 2007 Ford Ranger. These will be utility body vehicles that will also be used for the snow removal program.
All right, comments, questions, concerns from the committee? All right. Pretty straightforward.
I guess,
Dennis?
germane to a later discussion, if these were funded, is the balance suitable to deal with any emergent issues coming forward from the that fund, that enterprise fund? Is it in good shape, I guess?
Yeah, so what we do is we're actually working on it right now. The rate study that we do for rate adjustments every fiscal year. We have HDR is the firm we've been using for the last decade, I suppose, doing those. We take the budget that's been approved and put that into our rate structure and figure out how much we need to increase. We are looking at, it's been kind of holding steady at 6% for the last 5-6 years or so. We were getting to a point where not only were we going to be able to do that kind of $1 million a year of pipe work, but also, hold that rate steady at something less than 6% increase. And then DEP and EPA come out and hit us with the PFAS regulation. So now we're back. We're putting an additional almost $1 million a year into that infrastructure work that we hadn't anticipated, 5 years ago when we were doing that rate study. So we do, the same reserve free cash that Marie and George run and get certified for the general fund gets run for the sewer and water enterprise accounts as well. And I think we're in a decent spot. We have spent that down over the last couple of years, with the bonds we've taken out. But we do factor that into that rate adjustment from one year to next to make sure we have 90 days of free cash on hand, reserves on hand for both the operating and salaries expenses for water and sewer, just in case something happens.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns from the committee? Okay. All right, we'll move down to Chapter 90, street reconstruction and the meals tax for street reconstruction for a total of $1 million.
Yep. So this is straightforward. This comes back every year. Our Chapter 90 funding comes through the state. It's been roughly 625,000 the last few years. We don't actually know what that final number is yet. We have seen a slight decrease in that over the last few years. I think other towns are building more roads, or population's growing at a more rapid rate than what Foxboro is. So those are the two driving factors for how much we get: miles of roads and population. And then there's this other piece is TNC funding, which is a small amount. It's usually less than $10,000. It's the ride share. So anytime somebody starts an Uber or Lyft in Foxboro, we get 10 cents or something along those lines. It's a pretty small amount of money, but that has to be appropriated by town meeting as well. So that's the Chapter 90. Meals tax. This has been a conversation for a number of years now that, the primary use of that meals tax has been the OPID payment. We are looking for, $1 million towards the roadways. So that $350,000 is funding source from meals tax or other, based on the financial policies that the town has in place now. So something to discuss, and that'll kind of tie into what Bill was talking about earlier in regards to, sidewalks, and potential dedicated funding for sidewalks, and to cover that $1 million, that $350,000 that may not come from the meals tax.
Okay, so Yeah, just to address this again, I started out by saying this morning that we would talk a little bit about the funding at this stage for street reconstruction, which includes sidewalks to a degree. But we're in the process right now of coming up with a sort of a master plan for sidewalk improvements. Lance DelPriore is working on a project through Leadership Matters that is going to solicit a lot of input from the community on some of the priorities for how sidewalks should be done. Because one thing we've learned is that for us to set that in place tends to create more resistance in the community than what is really necessary to do, because I think there's a lot of differing opinions about how we approach it. So I think one thing we learned over time is that if we ask that we don't come to the answer to the discussion with the answer, we come to the discussion with a question, and then we ask the question and we get the input from the folks to see how that priority is set. So that way it's not entirely up down sort of lead this the policy being set from the top. It's sort of like a policy being set from the ground up, if you will. So I think Lance is in that process right now, and we think that will be well underway over the next few months. And I think, but yet at the same time, we've had 2 articles from folks looking to try and prioritize sidewalks improvements, and which I don't think anybody here, at least, thinks that that shouldn't be done. But the question is, how does it get paid for? What's the priorities? And where do we go? What gets done first? In other words, there are some maintenance issues, but there's also sort of closing the gaps on the sidewalk networks, which is something that Lance has already been working on with his consultant, and Chris have been working with us, a consultant, to try and identify the network of sidewalks and the areas, and sort of and developing heat maps, if you will, of where the sidewalks are used the most frequently. Obviously, as you might think, one of the things that you would automatically think is that the most typically used sidewalks are those around schools, the downtown area, and recreation areas. On the peripheral side of things, you see sidewalks being used, but they're more for jogging, for walking dogs, riding bikes, but they're less utilized in the areas where the high traffic areas are most identified. So that's where we're at. We're in the process of trying to identify all that, but I think the thing that we sort of have to look at this from the perspective of, let's put our money where our mouth is on this issue, because that has been the challenge over the years, and that we've not been able to really find a way to prioritize that until recently, where Marie and George had come up with the idea that maybe this is the time to start thinking about doing a bond to pay for sidewalk improvements, and do so much per year using that bonding capacity, which we currently do have. So I think that's something that we'd like to get into, but I think we'll have to talk about that as a follow-up meeting to this one, because the articles themselves and effectively have the advocates for the articles come in before the committee, because it is a capital item, to have them come in and make their case before this committee as well. So I think we'll have to do that follow-up for that reason. So I guess where we're at this point in time is that we've gone through all the articles. Is there anything I'm missing? I don't think I've missed anybody's articles at this point in time, or this request at this point. I think it's a case of then looking at a process of elimination or prioritization as to how we fund these items that we've identified this morning. I will, at this point, turn things over to Marie, who can sort of go through the funding ability that we have right now for addressing the items, and then we'll move to the prioritization process and allow her to sort of run through that process for us. So, Marie, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point to have that discussion. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So for this year, what we're looking to do is the same thing we did 2 fiscal years ago, where we asked you all to rate the requests using the following. So 1 would be fundable this year, 2 is to defer to the fall, and 3 is to defer to another fiscal year. When looking at the funding, so the ambulance funds, there's enough there to cover all of their requests. You have the 640 from Chapter 90, the 10,000 from TNC. Water and sewer are self-sufficient or self-supporting. I know that they built some of this money into their rates, and then some may come from their water or sewer free cash or retained earnings. On the free cash side, we've got about $1,355,000 to play with. And I think with that, we could fund the majority of the items that are coming from free cash, but some obviously will have to get deferred to the fall or to another fiscal year. And that's where we're, asking you all to make it the decision as the CIP committee, and then just prioritize these, and then we'll make it all work.
So you have in the information that was sent out to you, Marie has provided you with a listing of the under the CIP summary. There's a Excel worksheet that's been attached to today's agenda, which lists all the different items, and then you can go through the list and indicate your priorities based on what you feel is important to be funded either this year and then we can talk about how that adds up, and then we'll talk about the results of that after we finish going through our listing, and I'll provide everybody an opportunity to sort of give Marie a full listing of that. I don't know what's the best way to do that, Marie, is provide that information to you, or is it just we just have a 5 or 10 minute discussion, just everybody list their priorities for funding, and you just list them accordingly.
I think that the last time we did this, everyone in the committee just emailed me. So like they marked an X, in the column, whether it's, 1, 2, or 3 for each of these projects, and they emailed it back to me, and I just put everything together. And then just on the free cash. So if we were to fund everything, it would be $1,773,000 from free cash, and I think that's in the funding tab. And as I mentioned, we only have $1,355,000 available.
So we're short about $400,000 roughly.
Yeah, $418,000, just shy of that.
Right. Okay. So that would mean that we would have to, of the items that are listed here today, $400,000 roughly would have to be postponed to the fall or to another fiscal year altogether.
Yes.
So I ask everybody to consider that and think about that. In the interest of time today, since we probably have to come back anyways for a second meeting, we could everybody could do their prioritization and then email it to you, and then you could summarize that, and then we could come back and then we could have a discussion staff-wise, and then come back with a recommendation on how to fund it based upon the prioritization that everybody has given us. Does that seem reasonable? From your perspective or from the committee's perspective? That way, you wouldn't have an answer today, but you would have an answer probably within the next week about where we are.
I just have one question while Chris is here. The 2 Chevy 1-ton utility dump trucks. Do we get anything in terms of this exercise by deferring one of those?
On the general fund side?
Yeah, on the general fund side.
Yeah, so we have requested to replace one dump truck for the highway department. That one, I really need to see that one move forward. That one's having some structural rust issues. The other two, there's a 1-ton dump for tree and park and the 1-ton utility for equipment maintenance. Those both they are additions to the fleet. Operationally, they are important for us, but if we were to defer those two for those two additions to the fall, I actually have them already ranked on my spreadsheet as defer to the fall. So maybe I'm giving away my secrets, but I come to play and I'm a team player. So those two where they are a defer, they're an addition to the fleet. I would be willing to push those off until the fall, and that pretty quickly that gives us almost $200,000 right off the top for the general fund.
And on the list here, which two of those again? One's Public Works, and
so it's the 1-ton dump, tree and park,
right,
and then the 1-ton utility truck is the equipment maintenance. So those two are both additions.
Okay, so that's $125,000 for the Public Works, right?
Yep, the tree and park truck, dump truck is $125,000. The utility body is $67,500. And then we had already talked about the stump grinder as well. Push that off. We can push that one off for another fiscal year. We can talk about it in the fall if we have funding available in the fall. But we can also have that conversation with the other towns that are still in that mix. So, you're just shy of 300,000 right there.
Right.
Does anybody else? Go ahead. Go ahead.
How badly do we need tubas and violin?
Well, this is it's an interesting question, John, but I think we've already committed to the previous 2 fiscal years to finish, and this will be the last year to get rid of this. So I'm inclined to support it, but the only question I would have is could it be deferred to the fall? And does that make a difference in trend? I'm gonna have to defer to Bill or Amy on that one.
I would say push come to shove, just from my perspective, it could be deferred to the fall. Obviously it's equipment that's in disrepair and not as functional as it should be with trying to teach the program. I'd actually almost prefer to maybe split that one in half and take half now and half at a future date. That way, at least the couple bigger items that they really need to replace, they could do.
Okay.
Well, I think the other big ticket item that was kind of discussed a little bit was, that prisoner transport van. Is there a conversation that happens in the next week with the craft group where that piece of equipment, that vehicle has been dedicated or is solely for use at the stadium? Is there something that could be done from their end to support that replacement?
Well, I think that's a fair question. And what's the right forum for having that conversation with them? Because I do think, like I said, it's a $92,000 expense that really is almost exclusively for stadium use. And I think that's something we really should be considering with them to see if they have an interest in helping us with that. The Chief, I don't know if Chief is still on. I see he's off now, so we'll have to come back to him for that conversation. But I think it's something that we might want to talk about with them. So we could put that. I'm going to put that. I would prioritize. I'd put that off to the fall for that reason, because it's something that we could, or take it off completely if the funding does come through. Right. So as I'm looking at the list, I'm looking at, let's see, the school buses. Yeah, those have to be done. I don't think there's any question, in my opinion, about that. So The copiers, yeah, I think we gotta do that. That's a program that we committed to. And the street sweeper, again, it's last payment on that one. The 1-ton dump truck, I'm gonna defer to the fall. Replace the backhoe. I mean, we got to do that because it's the only question I have is can any of that be, or that's strictly public works though, right, Chris?
Yeah, that's true. That's highway and tree and park.
Okay, all right. There's
water has their own.
Water has its own, right? Okay.
Yep.
The 1-ton dump, that has to be, you're looking, but could that be deferred to the fall?
I'm looking for, yeah. I mean, in essence, those 1-ton trucks, the ordering doesn't open up until late summer, early fall for those.
So my thought is that you go ahead and order them, right?
Yep.
And I think if everybody in the committee is comfortable with that, I mean, I would put them as a number 2 priority. And basically say that, we'll readdress the funding in the fall. And then see where that goes. But I think you order them, and then if we can't get them funded, which I'd be surprised if we didn't get them funded, but that's just my thought on it. The lawnmower, I'm going to say yes because we need it. We've been trying to address some of these things for a while. The irrigation system. If you did that,
we'd want to do that over the summer.
You want to do that over the summer, yeah, exactly right. So I think that's a good point. The stump grinder I put to 3. I put a number 3 priority for that. So I'm looking at the entire. And then the other items are funded within their water receipts, et cetera. So that doesn't come out of the general fund. So those are less controversial because there's funding capacity for all of those. Theoretically, right?
Yes. The only when we move forward with a vote, and not today, but just taking that PFAS treatment plant SRF funding repayment and just renaming that.
We were looking at it as bonding. I was looking at it as bonding. So what? Let's go back to that for 1 second. The PFAS treatment plant SRF funding repayment.
That repayment likely doesn't start until FY26.
Okay.
But we have to pay for the design.
So you have to commit to the design right now. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So this is more. So you'd be taking the. All right. So why do we have to pay for it now?
So the design. So in order to accept the $14 million for the construction, we need to commit to doing the design work this upcoming fiscal year.
All right, fair enough. All right.
Then the design work is not something that can be paid through SRF funding.
Okay. All right. So right now, as I'm looking at this list, the entire list, there are 1, which is the prisoner transport van. That would be a number 2 priority. The music department equipment is a sort of a split, if you will, 50%. So it'd be 25,000. Marie, just for your notes, 25,000 for a priority now, and another 25,000 in the fall. Is that correct, Bill? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and quite honestly, if that came to a push in the fall, it could be pushed to next year, and just make it a 4-year program instead of a 3.
Okay, well, right now let's see where it falls out. I put 25,000 in each, and then see how that plays out. And then we go to the 1-ton dump goes to the fall. let's see, the 30 Chevy 3500 dump, 1-ton dump goes to the fall, and the DPW, I'm sorry, the 1-ton utility truck goes to the fall. Stump grinder goes to year, is a number 3 priority. And I think that's it. The rest of it is all kept in there. So what does that do to us, Marie, in terms of funding capacity? What, how far are we off at that point?
So you could actually do so if you did everything that's coming from free cash, if you deferred to the fall via the prisoner van, the 1-ton dump in highway, the 1-ton dump in tree and park, the utility truck in equipment maintenance, and the stump grinder. If you deferred those to the fall and did everything else as is, you'll need $1,263,000 from free cash.
Which is, and we
So you could do it
said,
all without splitting anything.
yeah, you wouldn't have to split it. So you could do the music department equipment, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Can I say one thing though? I think quite honestly, Chris is trying to work with you as far as the dump trucks and stuff. I think his original thought was the Chevy 3500 dump and the 3500 utility body and the stump grinder. If you put those 3 on the hold and you put the transport van and you put our split, I think you end up.
You're at 1.363844 with what Bill just explained.
All right. And I'll tell you what, to make it work, we'll split the copiers in half as well, and you'll get there. And that keeps, I agree with Chris's issues on as far as ordering equipment, and there's really no way to order equipment unless you're funded. So that's just my point.
All right. So how do we do that one more time? So somebody explain to me, because I'm a little slow sometimes. So so we are saying that we would do the replace 1-ton dump as a priority now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the only thing you'd be holding, if you look at it, prisoner transport, you hold.
Yeah.
The 4th item down, the 3500 1-ton dump, tree and park, you hold. The 3500 1-ton utility truck, you hold. And the stump grinder, you hold. You split the copiers in half, and you split the music in half. And I think you end up with just a few bucks left.
So we don't touch any of the dump vehicles under water and shore.
It doesn't do you any good. That's
Yeah,
not
it
part
doesn't
of free
help
cash.
the general fund anyways.
Yeah, I didn't think it did any good. I'm just, you raised an issue of the rates, Chris, trying to stay at 6% or below. Is that meet the goal?
No, those are small ticket items. That water budget's close $8 million with all the capital bonding involved in it. So, $100,000 isn't really going to make or break the bank. When we look at the rates, we'll look at, do we do that $1 million of water main replacement, this upcoming year, or does it get pushed off? That's the number that's going to help. And same thing. Those trucks, the utility bodies are, we're replacing a 2005 and a 2007 truck. So by the time we get those, one of those trucks is going to be almost 20 years old.
So Marie, can you just do us all a favor and share your screen and show us what that prioritization schedule looks like, so everybody sees it, and so we can, and if that works financially for everybody, we might even be able to get this done today.
Yeah, let me just go through and mark the X's real quick.
I'm just double checking. I'll check mine against yours just to make sure.
Okay. So, here. So, as we just said, the prisoner would be deferred to the fall. The actually no, the backhoe is included.
The backhoe was included, yeah.
Yeah, I did include that. I just have the wrong X here.
I had X's in the music department. I had split X's, right? There's a 1 and 2 for both the copiers and the music equipment. So,
Yep, so I have it split right here.
Okay.
So half now and half in the fall.
Yeah, I just put X's in both boxes just to show that we did split it. So
okay.
We're not pushing the DPW facility off, though, are we?
No. No.
Okay.
We're gonna bond that, though.
Right, but it's in. She has it in X for the fall. I would like to see that one go forward if you could.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think these were all
Yeah.
So the only one that's in question is the this one here, the
Meals
coming
tax.
from meals tax, because in reality the meals tax, as we know, is barely enough to cover just the OPEB. So to do this,
it would have to come out of free cash, right?
yeah. So
or a future bond.
Yep. Which, I mean, I think that's the way to go. You could really do a lot with the bond issuance. So I apologize if this is a little too small. So down here I have the running tally. So I have the 5-year certification, so that's the 120, the 200 for IT on the town side, the year 2 of the tasers, the 200 for computer and software upgrades for the schools, the 214 for the school buses, the 2 buses, and this is just from free cash. And then the 55 for the street sweeper. And then we've split the copier, so 20K for the copiers and 25K for the music equipment replacement. So that starts you at 883, 844. And then if we add the other items, which are the 1-ton dump truck for highway, the backhoe, the lawnmower, and the irrigation system, that brings you to $1,343,844. And then what we've deferred is.
But you missed the 55,000 for the sweeper.
Oh, no, I have that here in the 883. So the.
Oh, okay.
Yep, it's right here. So the 883K is what we said yes for sure. The other stuff is what we kind of decided after the fact that, okay, we'll do the dump truck, the backhoe, the lawnmower, and the irrigation system. So that brings you to the 1,343,844. And then what we're deferring is half of the copiers, half of the music equipment, the prisoner transport van, the 1-ton dump truck for tree and park, the utility truck for equipment maintenance, and the stump grinder. And that's where we get back to the 1,773, which is what we needed. And then that's also, so your funding, so everything that's coming from ambulance is being funded, Chapter 9640, the 10,000 from TNC. And I think the plant design needs to be adjusted, right, Chris?
Yep, that'll be 785. Or, yeah, 785.
So that brings this down a little bit. So, and as I mentioned earlier, we have $1,350,000 available from free cash. We'll actually only be using $1,343,000 right now. And then with the 107 coming from the school operating budget, potentially for that 3rd bus. And then, so that, like I said, that only leaves the meals tax, which that sounds like we need to have an another discussion to
Yeah, to get to
a
that point.
potential bond issuance for that and sidewalks.
Mhm. Okay.
So, do that there. That, I mean, that takes care of the entire plan. So you've got,
Where's the opera coming from? Oh, there's no opera money. Okay, great.
no, that was from last year. So we got the 602 from the ambulance, 640 from Chapter 90, 10,000 from the TNC. We have 2,055,000 coming from water receipts, 30,000 from sewer, and then we have 1,343,844 from free cash and 107,000 from operating. For a total of 4,787,981.
Okay. Is that something everybody feels comfortable with at this point? Are there any further questions about this at this point? Because so we will have a follow-up discussion. I mean, at this point, this would be the plan that we would present at this point to the Board of Selectmen for final consideration, and then ultimately the town meeting. But that would still be subject to further discussion on the issue of the sidewalk, the two articles that have been put forward for looking at sidewalk funding.
The other thing though, Bill, the only thing that's missing there that Marie didn't have in was that bonding for the DPW. So I was trying to figure out why your totals don't match the sheet. So that's one of them.
DPW funding was going to be bond
renovation. The
renovation going to
750.
be bond. We're going to bond that anyways.
Right, but it wasn't listed in her uses.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, going through. I was just looking at strictly what the cash piece right now that we have on hand.
Okay. Great. All right. Any further questions about this approach? I mean, what we'll have is this. Maria will clean up the sheet, and then we'll have that presented for the second meeting of this, and see if we can pull something together for this week, either remotely or in person, whatever works best. I mean, it depends upon everybody's schedule here to see how that works and if they're available or not. Maybe a combination of both. Maybe we can do instead of doing it all remotely, but I'll work with everybody this week on Monday to try and pull that together. All right. Any questions about this, Dennis?
No, I think we did some really good work here.
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to why we couldn't go ahead and vote now if we've come to consensus on this.
We could. The only question is the 350 piece, Amy, as far as the the bonding piece, because we really haven't addressed that as part of this, part of the plan, the meal plan. I mean, we could conceivably, if the 350 doesn't, if people don't want that to come out of a bonding issue, then we would have to go back and make further adjustments.
Well, we won't have an answer for that for a while though, right?
Well, it would be this, we'd try and address it this week if we could, next week, rather, if we could.
I think we could vote everything with the exception of that piece, and then everything else is said. And I mean, that bond discussion for sidewalks and roadways is kind of its own conversation. I mean, we could, if we needed to or wanted to, we could certainly vote on this budget at that meeting, but I feel like that should be its own conversation.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. So I'm okay with proceeding forward with a vote. I'll have to, Maria, I'll have to ask you to put that in the form of a motion so that we, because I don't have all those numbers in front of me. So if you can put that in the form of a motion, and I'll ask somebody to so move it and then second it. How's that? All right. Can you do that, Marie, for us?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now, actually.
Okay, good.
Just give me
All right, no problem. We're actually squeezing time here today, so I appreciate everybody's ability to do that.
Good. I'm watching the snow start to fly again out the window.
Yeah.
The
I'm not
salt
seeing
trucks
it
coming
here.
by, fill it up, and everything else.
Yeah, it's in your area. It's not here though. So I'm
Yeah.
not seeing it here. So
All right, so I have it right here. So when you add back in that 750 for the facility renovation, so we're up to 5,537,981. That's the total of your entire plan.
okay. Okay. So can somebody make that? Do we want to indicate the funding sources as well? As part of the motion?
Yeah, let me see if I can try this. And I'll squint. I'll make a motion to approve the capital improvement plan as presented for the total of 5,537,981.
Okay.
Funding sources coming from free cash, ambulance fund, operating budget, bonding, water receipts, and sewer receipts, along with Chapter 90 and TNC funding.
All right. Do I have a
I'll
second to that?
second that motion.
Okay. All right. So and this would be a voice vote from everyone. It'll be a roll call vote. So I'll start with John Mahoney.
Yes.
All right. Dennis,
Dennis, yes.
Chris Gallagher,
Yes.
Amy Burdos,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay. All right. So I will work. You'll be hearing back from me from Kate. And Katie Lang will actually reach out to you with an alternative date. Dennis, are you still away next week at all?
I'm back Wednesday. I'm available anytime by Zoom, but I'm back Wednesday in person.
Okay. AdCom's supposed to meet at 7 on Wednesday, right, John?
Yes, we should be at that time. Yes.
So is it possible that we could meet, say around 5 o'clock?
Well, actually, Bill, let me correct myself. We made an one time only. I think we're scheduled to start at 6 on Wednesday.
All right. How about 4 o'clock on Wednesday?
I can't promise what the ad. Who do you want?
It would just be you. It would be just you from this committee. The committee would be this committee meeting again at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. I could do it 3, I suppose, because if everybody here is convenient for everybody, we could do that earlier.
Yeah, if we're doing by Zoom, that would be great.
Okay. All right. So let's plan to do that. I'll have to invite. When is Jack back? Jack Martin back? John, is he back on Wednesday? You know?
Yeah, sorry, Bill. I don't really talk to him that much.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, we'll have to verify the availability of the folks on the articles. So, then one of them's yours, John. So you'll be able to speak to yours anyways, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then the other one will be Jack Martin and see if he's available. If he's not, then I'll have to work around that to a degree. But we pretty much know what he wants anyway, so that's not an issue. But I think we can all try to work around that if we have to. All right. All right. So we'll try and shoot for next Wednesday at say 3 o'clock. Does that work for everybody? Amy, is that good for you?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Chris?
Yep.
Does that work for you?
Make that work.
Okay. Okay, and then Marie will, and George will try and work through that. Dennis, we'll try and get it done. Okay. All right, thanks everyone, and thanks for your indulgence this morning. This was good work. We got it done in record time. I think this is one of the earliest ones I've ever had to do. So this being my last one, I'm glad we broke a new record. So that's a good thing.
Set a good
All right.
precedent for the next guy.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to use that as the new standard for going forward. So, all right, everyone. So I'll take a motion to adjourn at this point.
I'll
So
make that
moved.
motion.
All right. And second from Dennis. I'll go with roll call. John Mahoney.
Yes. Yep.
I'll go with Chris.
Yep. Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. At this point, we stand adjourned. Thanks everyone for your indulgence this morning, and great work. Appreciate it. I'll see you all back on Wednesday of this week, the upcoming week. All right. Thanks
Great.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Okay. Bye-bye.